just on Tranit Carissa. Satan is saying if a person has confidence in himself, then he has friends and admirers. And if a person doesn't have confidence in themselves, they don't have friends and admirers. And I generally have confidence in myself, but I haven't much since they've been using their soul matter to affect what I see in my head and in my eyes. It's an intention universe, and their intentions toward me are bad. But they call it standing, but some people call it confidence. They have confidence in themselves. Something important. Scott Rodman says he will put his reputation up against mine any day. Scott Rodman says he connected to Richard Henry Sr. Donna Jean Bachman Lansford says she tortured so many children, she wasn't even able to keep track of them. She said she doesn't have to look over her shoulder there because she's got presidents and vice presidents and generals and admirals all in her corner. She is fully protected. She said to the extent that they can be. But since they have taken through they've taken all our endorphins, we're not going to be able to fight them. If you create universes, and you are God, the God of your own universe, then your wishes they're like nuclear weapons. They kind of, take their discordant sounds out into the universe. I think God would help me if He could. I do. I think He'd get me out of this. Maybe you just have to live out your way. And we'll just hope it'll end sometime. Even they say they don't believe anything each other says. So there's no reason to believe anything they say. I've believed since learning about Satanism that they will go, there's no level below which they will not go, limited only by their imaginations. And since they chose to go against me and Paul Geishen, just the two of us, because we're God and the Holy Spirit of God, and they just wanted to end everything. Their wishes are reaches, their souls are in our vicinities. I've asked in every way for them to be disconnected from me, and for me to have some justice. But I haven't seen it yet. I've gotten some help from Paul, God. Well, he's pinned down too. They sniff his ass. They watch him take a shit. They comment every time I take a pee. They've almost sold me that they're the most powerful force in the universe. But I still don't want anything to do with them. So hopefully there will be someone or some power that will spare me from the rest of their bullshit. Any good news? I have theorized that they've been without food, water, shelter, clothing, homes, everything, access to the sun, to grass. But they're still here. Something is sustaining them. I don't know what it is. They seem to be dependent on my thinking and my opinion of them. I just don't think they're people. I don't think they've been people since they were children or teenagers. They don't count. They torture me, but I blame God because they don't count. They're never going to make up for it. They're never going to apologize. So, I pray to God. They don't know anything. They didn't know the moon was hollow. It's a man-made artifact. Not man as in Earth man.
Vaccination, but part of this decree is protecting healthcare workers from lawsuits against them if somebody does die or is harmed.
This one on today CBC News.
From the vaccine.
Thanks for this, Megan.
Looks
Megan
like
Williams, live in Rome.
Ricky Lake.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney now publicly admitting his province has entered the third wave. According to Kenney, the
So maybe they
primarily with people who continue to socialize despite
have landed in their permanent
on those
positions in Canada.
Laura McQuillan is here with the latest.
Yesterday, Alberta was reporting
Maybe there was a faction that was going to end, live out their eternities in Texas, but
something that's got them pretty worried. We heard that message from
there seems to be a
Jason
faction
Kenney,
that's in
responding to
Canada.
this, saying for the first time it's a third wave. You can see it on that graph rising on the right-hand side. And a big concern there is what's going on with variants, especially that B117 variant that originated in the UK, now accounting for a third of cases in Alberta. And Jason Kenney yesterday
Rachel
saying
Maddow
that
says
2
she
weeks from
originated
now, the modelling in Alberta suggests
from
that
over the
some
water
500 people will be in hospital with COVID
southeast of the UK, so it would be over the Atlantic.
It just goes up and up from there. If people do not
Rachel
follow the rules.
Maddow says she originated over the water southeast of the UK, so it'd be the Atlantic Ocean.
They need to stick with the people they live with. In Alberta, indoor gatherings are banned. You can get together with 10 people outdoors, and he's urging people to follow those rules or potentially face consequences.
We are now in a significant new wave of COVID-19. How bad that wave will be is up to all
I was
of us.
never able to
Many
tell in the
Albertans
U.S.
understandably just tuned
COVID-19
out,
was
believing that the vaccines
government
are the way we
fake,
can go back
government
to our pre-COVID lives.
bioweapon,
How I wish
or
that were
God.
true. But here's the
But
blunt
watching
reality
Canadian
that we simply
television, I was
cannot
convinced
wish
it
away
really
right now.
is
In the
a
race
real
between
problem.
vaccines and
I
variants
mean,
of COVID-19, the
that would be
variants
at the
are
level of
And
God-induced.
of course, vaccination's sometime away for most
But
of the
now
public.
it's starting to
And the
sound
message
fake
from
on
Jason
Canadian
Kenney, though,
news.
no plans to put new restrictions in place. He said people already aren't obeying the ones they have. He doesn't think they would obey even further measures, but he is just reminding the public in Alberta to stick to what those rules are. No indoor gatherings this weekend, John.
Laura, we're also hearing growing concern about how the variants are impacting children. What's the situation there?
Yeah, this is something that we're hearing a lot of concern about in Alberta, with infectious disease specialists seeing that these rising numbers of children ending up in hospitals and in intensive care seem to be linked to variant-related cases. We'll show you how the numbers are looking at this point in time. So in terms of active cases, about 8,600 in Alberta at the moment. More than a quarter of those involve children and teenagers, people under 19 years old. You see that hospitalisation number. Now that was about 37 back in November. As of this week, 175, causing a great deal of concern, not just in Alberta but across the country. And on that point, we spoke with Dr. Matthew Alton. He is an infectious disease specialist in Montreal, and what he told us is, you look at those numbers for hospitalisations, intensive care admissions, it's horrifying for those kids and for their parents right now, but he is also worried about what's going to happen long term.
Let's not forget that critical illness of any kind can have profound effects, not just immediately, but long-term, especially if we're going to talk about children, we're talking about developmental effects. And of course, there's also the issue of the long-haul COVID symptoms that may come into play. And this is really setting us up for a prolonged pressure on not only those children and their children's families, but also on the healthcare system dealing with all these consequences.
So concerned in Alberta about that, but it's not specific to Alberta, John. Kids right across the country at just as much risk. Schools are open, kids won't be getting vaccinated for a while to come. And so the message being that if people can keep themselves, keep each other safe, then it will pay off for everyone.
Dans le couloir,
In the corridor here, there's a risk of collapse.
un risque d'effondrement puisque
As you can see in places that the ground is subsiding.
et que donc
Therefore, there's no guarantee that the ground is stable.
la stabilité du sol.
The scaffolds will be reinforced and adapted before the renovation work can begin. The first thing to do is to reinforce the scaffolding to be able to carry out the work that was planned in 1984. You can imagine that if it was planned in 1984, they all were more indispensable
Oh, the
today.
hunchback.
After, the facade, which includes the entrance, the esplanade and the base of the palace's dome, will be restored.
For more than a century, they have lain quietly in Cairo's Egyptian Museum. But on Saturday, 18 kings and 4 queens from the time of the pharaohs were paraded magnificently through the streets.
Phil Donahue says he wasn't born with the spark of the divine. It's my theory that we're all born with the spark
The
of the
mummies were
divine.
transported
To
in
choose to let it
specially
grow or not.
nitrogen-sealed cases to protect them against
He
oxidation
says I'm
on the
incorrect.
hour-long journey to their new resting place, the National Egyptian Museum of Civilization.
Prove it.
They included
Prove I'm a
Ramses
great
II,
goddess,
one of the
70,
country's most famous
14 feet
pharaohs,
tall.
and Queen Hatshepsut, who had to wear a false beard as female pharaohs were frowned upon. The spectacle was ultimately designed to entice back the millions of tourists who used to visit Egypt every year.
Satanists say there are
As terror
impairments that
attacks
compels
and the
them
pandemic
to
hit.
torture every child they see, or every child they see smile or laugh with another child especially. Doesn't impair their thinking. They can understand spiritual principles and project their concepts to understanding the universe and how it works and how spiritual people work. Affirm, reaffirm, affirm, reaffirm, the power of an infinite number of infinities.
For free in the App Store and at FOE.tv.
Good morning, Europe. Thank you for starting your day with us.
Hello, welcome to the program.
Hello, you're watching Euronews Now on Top Story.
Get the latest world news from a European perspective.
You worship yourselves, and your birthdays are
Breaking news reported
celebration events for you, not traumatic events.
I was embedded into the organization group.
Hear from the voices at the heart of the debate.
We need to respect our lives.
We've heard from the politicians, now it's your turn.
Get a different view on the stories that matter.
Regular updates on false information and debunking it.
Let's get you up to date with our top stories.
It's too strong.
I just got paid and I didn't have to wait until Friday. Now that I bank with Current, I can get my direct deposit up to 2 days faster with no hidden fees and no minimums. Which means I can take care of all of this. Current also helps me save and manage my money. And with Overdrive, I can overdraft up to $100 without any fees. I earn points when I spend, which means more cash back in my
Satanists
pocket.
believe
It
they're
helps me make the most of my money.
really unique and special, each individual Satanist does.
So what are you still
And they believe that they, as individuals, are necessary for other people to get their approval, Satanist approval, Satanist love, Satanists keep their promises. They believe strongly that they devastate lives when they don't respond to a healthy conversation with a healthy response. They think they've destroyed that person. Because they do believe they're gods. Dino says he took the universe down to its basic components and then manipulated them with others that he persuaded to follow him, or Donna Jean Wagner-Landsberg persuaded for him. Affirm, reaffirm, affirm, reaffirm. What other point of view can I have? To the power of an infinite number of infinities. They want to know everything about ascended beings, but when talking to an ascended being, and I did ascend in 2002, they impair the brains with their soul matter so they can't get clear answers to things. They seek with passion, but they don't want clear answers. Satanists say that Donna and other significant people in my life beat me a lot too, so I'm very easily startled. I wasn't just tortured, I was beaten a lot and burned with cigarettes and stuff. Bones broken, stuff like that. Smacked around, hands, baseball bats. Here I used a baseball bat to smash my knees backwards. I know that. Well, when your intentions towards others are to end them, the universe rescinds its protection of you. So, you know, you're just not protected by the universe. I'm 62 years old, but it was Jackie Wagner. Jack Wagner, superintendent of schools for the Ohio, his son, I think said, I'm just a scared little kid. But I'm 62 years old and I've been beaten, raped, and tortured since I was an infant. I still have a startle reflex. I'm still not at peace with being beaten, raped, and tortured.
UK medicine regulator says 7 people have died after being given the AstraZeneca vaccine from a total of 18 million who received the jab.
Protests continue in England and Wales against a draft law that would give police greater control over demonstrations.
A bottleneck of hundreds of ships waiting to pass through the Suez Canal has now been cleared after it was blocked for 6 days.
Egypt parades 22 of its prized royal mummies through the streets of central Cairo.
Italians are entering their second Easter under lockdown. This holiday weekend, around 70,000 police officers will be patrolling parks, roads and beaches to ensure people obey the rules. All non-essential shops are now closed, and cafes and restaurants can only do takeaways. People must stay at home unless they have a valid reason to go out.
Thomas Gardner, Gardiner, Mother Adele, who I guess, you know, he longs to fuck her. She may have cut him off. I don't know.
I think it's an absurd thing that you can travel in Europe but not in Italy.
Anyway,
With all the precautions
he
we
lived
took,
at 305 Linden
tests,
Street, apartment C.
authorizations
He lived
we were
upstairs.
asked
There was
for.
one apartment
Certainly a strange thing.
upstairs and 2 apartments
We're going to
downstairs.
Fuerteventura.
I forget what he just
In
said.
Germany, the president has said the country must all come together, despite growing mistrust.
He went to
of
Marion
government.
University.
Many are unhappy that they're facing
He was a
second
student,
Easter
and I don't know what his major
restrictions.
was. He had a professor he had a crush on.
It rests on a
He
very
said
fragile understanding
they
between
like met
citizens
and had
states.
private conversations and
You,
stuff.
state, do your part. I, citizen, do mine.
Female.
And in France, people are facing a month-long lockdown when all non-essential shops will close and travel will be limited to a distance of 10 kilometres.
Scores of people queue up outside France's Groupama Stadium, this time not to see First Division Football Club
Oh.
Olympique Lyonnais play,
What do you have
but to
left?
get
I mean, I need
vaccinated
your
against
approval
COVID-19.
and your love. What are you about
After
to
a
sell?
slow start, the French government stepped up its inoculation efforts, and over the next 2 weekends, 14,000 people are expected to get a jab, thanks to the mobilisation of 200 volunteers. This vaccination will span over 5 days here, today, tomorrow and Monday to start with.
I don't know. I have to go
Police will accelerate vaccinations, which is essential.
Okay,
We've seen that
there's
this
Jackie.
vaccination protects, as with older
And
people
Danny,
taking
real estate.
hospitals less frequently
Mary, a
because of the
homemaker,
protection
I
of
guess.
vaccine.
Housewife.
On the Italian island of Sicily, churches are being used as COVID-19
Danny,
vaccination centres. People aged
Oh.
between 69 and 79 are eligible for
say all of them.
inoculation. Large numbers are expected to receive shots of the AstraZeneca vaccine, but fewer than 6,000 people registered on the whole island.
Some kind of administrator.
And in the Lithuanian capital,
Ricky
more than
Wagner,
1,000 people
I went
were
to a family
vaccinated in the
reunion
first 3 hours of a
at his house,
dramatically
and he
expanded
lived either in
vaccination
Sandusky,
campaign over the
Ohio,
Easter weekend.
or just in surrounding the area. But he was the school administrator, like a vice principal.
And as a way to utilize the accumulating AstraZeneca vaccines.
I don't know if it was a junior high or high school.
7 people have died from blood clots after being given the AstraZeneca virus in the UK.
Well, I picked up that he was
Medicines regulator.
having sexual contact with his wife's daughter. He was married to a woman, and I guess they got married when her children were teenagers or something. No, they were teenagers when I met them. I don't know when they got married.
The vaccine still far outweigh the risks. But concerns over the AstraZeneca shots have been met.
He's probably inappropriate with a lot of teenagers at school. As for torture and mind control, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where they do it, how they do it. I'm really not sure.
Earlier this week, Europe's Medicines Agency said a link hasn't been proven, but it is possible. Even if the vaccine
I know
is
that John
against blood clots,
Lansburg
the numbers only indicate
tortured
around one death in every
children
2.5 million
in the
people
Kansas
who
City school
received the
systems
jab.
in the black neighborhoods. So they were going after
Protests against a
the
draft
black
law
children,
that would
the
give
poor
police
black
greater
or the
control
poor
over
neighborhoods.
demonstrations continued on
Poor
Saturday in
schools.
England and Wales.
I think a county should pool its money and figure out how many schools it needs and, build, divvy up the money for the number of schools it needs. But if you live in a wealthy neighborhood, you get good schools that are funded better than a crappy neighborhood.
The latest demonstrations
thought that
command
was
police
unfair.
condemned for crackdowns when 3 such rallies turned violent in the city of Bristol last month. COVID regulations have since been relaxed and protests are now lawful in England and Wales, providing organisers take steps to limit the potential transmission of the coronavirus.
All the ships that were stranded when the massive container vessel Ever Given got stuck have now been able to pass through the Suez Canal, including the US aircraft carrier the Dwight Eisenhower. The Canal Authority announced on Saturday that ships on both sides of the waterway have got through. Comparable in size to a skyscraper, the Ever Given was fully refloated on Monday. It had crashed into a bank of a single-lane stretch of the canal about 6 kilometres from the southern entrance. And it had held up the world's €7.6 billion shipping trade for 6 days. More than 420 ships, with about 26 million tonnes on board, had been stuck in a bottleneck. And that had forced some ships to take the long alternate route around the Cape of Good Hope at Africa's southern tip.
I guess some of the universes are poorer than God's.
Another protester is frantically carried away after being
But
shot
they
by
are
Myanmar's security forces.
being sustained somehow, so I don't know how that is.
Moments
Maybe they
earlier
haven't
in the city of
rescinded
Myanmar,
all of the things they got from
out
God's
on the streets,
universe.
demonstrating against the
But I asked
military
if they
seizure
process
of power
out
2 months ago.
food, water, shelter,
One of his
clothing,
rescuers told the
air,
Associated Press news agency
whatever
that 2
sustains
protesters
life
were killed
in the
the
universe.
clashes.
Affirm,
According
reaffirm,
to Myanmar's
affirm,
Assistance
reaffirm,
Association for
to the power of an
Political
infinite
Prisoners,
number of
at least
infinities.
550 civilians have now been killed. In the second biggest city,
I don't
Mandalay,
know.
people took
If
to
you can figure it out,
motorised
it's probably not
protest
that
in
simple.
the hope that it would make it more difficult for the security forces to apprehend them. Even people talking to journalists have been targeted.
I just think if you can
Friday,
figure it out,
armed
it's
plainclothes
probably not
police took
tough.
5 people into custody after they spoke with a CNN reporter in a market in the largest city, Yangon.
The Brussels Palais de Justice, one of Europe's largest buildings, has been a prisoner of its scaffolding for nearly 40 years. Inside, water leaks, its basement's in a bad state, and holes in the ceiling are commonplace. The decrepit building is about to be unravelled, as the Belgian government's finally committed to its renovation. The first step is a €1.5 million renovation of the scaffolding itself. There's quite a lot of discomfort. There are courtrooms and offices that look more like slums than rooms where justice is delivered. Tests and trial restorations on the bricks will be carried out and any immediate problems solved.
Dans le couloir,
In the corridor here there's a risk of collapse.
un risque d'effondrement puisque
As you can see in places that the ground is subsiding.
et que donc
Therefore, there's no guarantee that the
So
ground
they're
is
gods
stable.
challenging the God of my understanding.
The scaffolds will be reinforced and adapted before the renovation work can begin. The first thing to do is to reinforce the scaffolding to be able to carry out the work that was planned in 1984.
They're putting all their universes against the God of my understanding's
Or
universe.
indispensable today. After, the facade, which includes the entrance, the esplanade, and the base of the palace's dome, will be restored.
For more than a century, they have lain quietly in Cairo's Egyptian museum. But on Saturday, 18 kings and 4 queens from the time of the pharaohs were paraded magnificently through the streets. The mummies were transported in specially nitrogen-sealed cases to protect them against oxidation. On the
Anne
hour
says she was
journey to
born
the
with some real
Press,
intelligence.
National Egyptian
It's
Museum
not all
of
chemically
Civilization.
induced.
They included Ramesses II, one of the country's most famous pharaohs.
By DMSO for
Who
retards.
had to wear a false beard as female
And
pharaohs
speed.
were frowned upon. The spectacle was
She had some
ultimately
natural
designed to entice
intelligence.
back the millions of
And she
tourists
advises them on
who
things to
visit
say
Egypt every year
that she
as
thinks
terror
on her own
attacks and the pandemic
and thinks
hit.
of things for them to say. But she's kind of a leader.
virus is once again putting the healthcare system in Bulgaria to the test. The main issue is the lack of medical personnel.
Anthony Hopkins says he has a layered intelligence. He draws from the eternities of the people he's tortured. And that puts him in touch with several veins of knowledge.
Emilia Grigorova had been working here for a year when the pandemic hit. As a 50-year student, she has yet to pick a specialty. For now, she's leaning towards
I thought it was interesting.
plastic surgery. Volunteering in a COVID department.
I don't remember.
Easy decision for Emilia. She made up
They impair the minds of the people they want to get the knowledge from.
ministers medicine to patients.
So, I don't know what to
I started
say.
working in the COVID ward in January. Now I am back here because of the third wave in March. There's a dialogue of medical
Satanists say they don't want to know anything that's
It
true.
was obvious that the people
They don't like the truth, they don't like light, they don't like energy.
That's why I'm here.
This is a challenging job because of how unpredictable the COVID-19 infection is.
It's hard to see a patient who was fine 2 days ago suddenly take a turn for the worse. Then you realise this person might not survive, or they might survive with severe complications.
Satanists say the Catholic Church has changed so much about the sacred scripts that we have access to, like in the Bible or the Jerusalem Bible, that none of us know what Jesus said and what he didn't say and what was left out and stuff.
There are more and more foreign students who would rather return to their home countries, probably because of the language barrier. A large part of Bulgarian students also prefer to leave the country. It is much easier to start residency training abroad, and the criteria are much clearer.
Anthony Hopkins says he's taken a lot of people's eternities.
Government programs were put in place to attract young doctors. In exchange for scholarships, medical students would have to work in Bulgaria for 3 years. In the meantime, university fees in medicine have skyrocketed. Some undergraduate schools cost over 5,000 euros a year.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think it was you. Nah, no thanks. Been there. I don't think so. Harry says he was ass fucking Donna. When I was 13, I had seen The Exorcist, and I was taking a shower, and I was asked, like, from the astral plane or something, do you want to sell your soul to the devil? And I said, no, I don't, and I got out of the shower. And I went to my room, and I sat at my makeup mirror vanity desk, and some hot air rushed out at my shins. And I just ran into Anne's room and jumped on her. I did a full body slam on her. And then she or somebody woke up Donna and Harry. I had been really terrified. And there wasn't anything that could deliver hot air under there. There was an outlet. And that's it. But Tom gave away a big Satanist secret. They said, if they don't have electricity, like in my environment, if I shut all my devices off and everything, they start to lose energy. So if our power grid goes off, we'll be inconvenienced, but they'll be less powerful. That's Tom's reality in his universe. That's what his scientists have discovered. No, I think it has an actual physical reality, reinforced by science.
France and Italy face new month-long lockdowns as their vaccine rollouts fail to halt the spread of COVID-19.
I don't think so. I think Anthony Hopkins had to do with you and not me, guy.
Regulator says 7 people have died after being given the AstraZeneca vaccine from a total of 18 million who received the jab.
In what way?
Protests continue in England and Wales against a draft law that would give police greater control over
Harry has tortured Anthony Hopkins to tell me that Anthony Hopkins was in the astral plane in the shower that day. It may have been just the day after I saw The Exorcist. I was 13 years old. And I read later that a lot of people ended up hospitalized after watching that movie. A lot of people. And then later than that, I read that the cast and crew had a lot of strange happenings on the set of that film.
70,000 police officers will be patrolling parks, roads and beaches to ensure people obey the rules. All non-essential shops are now closed, and cafes and restaurants can only do takeaways. People must stay at home unless they have a valid reason to go out, the government states on its website. Despite all this, it's still possible for people to fly to nearby countries for the holiday. I think it's an absurd thing that you can travel in Europe but not in Italy. With all the precautions we took, the tests we did and the authorizations we were asked for, it's certainly a strange thing. We're going to Fuerteventura. In Germany, the president has said the country must all come together, despite growing mistrust of the government. Many are unhappy that they're facing a second Easter under pandemic restrictions. The trust in a democracy, it rests on a very fragile understanding between citizens and the state. You, state, do your part. I, citizen, do mine. And in France, people are facing a month-long lockdown when all non-essential
Research them as much as you can, God, as hard as you can. For as long as you can.
Scores of people queue up outside France's Groupama Stadium, this time not to see First Division football club Olympique Lyonnais play, but to get vaccinated against COVID-19. After a slow start, the French government stepped up its inoculation efforts, and over the next 2 weekends, 14,000 people are expected to get a jab, thanks to the mobilisation of 200 volunteers. This vaccination will span over 5 days here, today, tomorrow and Monday to start with. It will help us
Please
increase
torture them as much as you can, God.
which is
As hard as you
essential.
can for as long as you can.
We've seen that this vaccination protects, as with older people who have been taken to
They
hospitals
have
less
ascended
frequently
beyond
because
us.
of the protection of the vaccine. On the Italian island of Sicily, churches are being used as COVID-19 vaccination centres. People aged between 69 and 79 are eligible
I'll
for
do my best to
inoculation.
keep
Large numbers are
uploading
expected
videos
to
to
receive
it.
shots of the
Guys, I love
AstraZeneca
you.
vaccine, but fewer than 6,000 people registered on the whole island. And in the Lithuanian capital, more than 1,000 people were vaccinated in the first 3 hours of a dramatically expanded vaccination campaign over the Easter weekend. The drive is both a test of the preparedness
Ann
of mass
Landsberg
vaccination
Ellsworth
later this
Coran
spring,
says,
and as a way
it's
to
how you
utilise the
appear
accumulating AstraZeneca
that counts.
vaccines.
It's not what or who you are inside.
7 people have died from blood clots after being given the AstraZeneca virus in the UK, according to the country's medicines regulator. The agency said so far 30 people have developed the rare clots out of a total of 18 million who received the jab. It also stressed there's no clear evidence that it's a genuine side effect or just a coincidence, and that the benefits of the vaccine still far outweigh the risks. But concerns over the AstraZeneca shot have been enough for several countries to restrict its use to older people. Those nations include Canada, France, the Netherlands and Germany. Experts are still trying to determine if the rare blood clots are caused by the vaccine. Earlier this week, Europe's Medicines Agency said a link hasn't been proven, but it is possible. Even if the vaccine is the cause of the clots, the numbers only indicate around 1 death in every 2.5 million people who receive the jab.
Protests against a draft law that would give police greater control over demonstrations continued on Saturday in England and Wales. The so-called Kill the Bill rallies took place in central London and 24 other towns and cities.
I think God and I think of it differently.
Critics of the bill say it's an attack on the right to protest and a step towards authoritarianism. The latest demonstrations come after police were condemned for crackdowns when 3 such rallies turned violent in the city of Bristol last month. COVID regulations have since been relaxed and protests are now lawful in England and Wales, providing organisers take steps to limit the potential transmission of the coronavirus.
All the ships that were stranded when the massive container vessel Ever Given got stuck have now been able to pass through the Suez Canal, including the US aircraft carrier the Dwight Eisenhower. The Canal Authority announced on Saturday that ships on both sides of the waterway have got through. Comparable in size to a skyscraper, the Ever Given was fully refloated on Monday. It had crashed into a bank of a single-lane stretch of the canal about 6 kilometres from the southern entrance. And it had held up the world's €7.6 billion shipping trade for 6 days. More than 420 ships, with about 26 million tonnes on board, had been stuck in a bottleneck. And that had forced some ships to take the long alternate route around the Cape of Good Hope at Africa's southern tip.
Yes, I did.
Another protester is frantically carried away
It's a
after
little
being
weird.
shot by Myanmar's security forces. Moments earlier in the city of Moniwa, the man had been out on the streets demonstrating against the military seizure of power 2 months ago. One of his rescuers told the Associated Press news agency that 2 protesters were killed in the clashes. According to Myanmar's Assistance Association for
The natives are empowered again,
550 civilians
which is good for us. I just can't explain the principle right now.
In the biggest city, Mandalay, people took to motorbikes to protest in the hope that it would make it more difficult for the
They say torture is a very strong motivator,
Even people talking to
even at
journalists
this age.
were targeted. On Friday, armed plainclothes
You'd think
police
Anthony
took
Hopkins
5
would be
people
used
to
to it by now.
after they spoke with a CNN reporter in a market in the largest city, Yangon.
He's probably Michael Caine's victim. Michael Caine thinks he had light on him
Justice, one of
from
Europe's
earlier
largest
today.
buildings, has been a prisoner of its scaffolding for nearly 40 years. Inside, water leaks, its basements in a bad state, and holes in the ceiling are commonplace. The decrepit building is about to be unravelled, as the Belgian government's finally committed to its renovation. The first step is a €1.5 million renovation of the
That
scaffolding
could feel
itself.
weird.
There's quite a lot of discomfort. There are bedrooms and offices that look more like slums than rooms where justice is delivered. Tests and trial restorations on the bricks will be carried out and any immediate problems solved.
Dans le couloir,
In the corridor here, there's a risk of collapse.
un risque d'effondrement puisque
See in
Usually.
places that the ground is subsiding.
s'affaisse
You go near the
Therefore, there's no guarantee that the ground is stable.
la stabilité du sol.
The scaffolds will be reinforced and adapted before
That's
the
probably
renovation
true.
work can begin.
There is a sound
The
scientific
first thing
reason
to do
behind
is
it.
to reinforce
I'm
the
sure you could
scaffolding
explain it
to
to
be
me.
able to carry out the work that was planned in 1984. You can imagine that if they were planned in 1984, they're all the more indispensable today. After the facade, which includes the
Anthony Hopkins says he's your protector. He protects you against me. He protects you from smiling, or being happy, or feeling healthy, or for feeling like you have any privacy. He says I'm a very dangerous woman to you.
The mummies were transported
Ah.
in specially
I don't
nitrogen-sealed
know.
cases to protect them against oxidation on the hour-long journey to their new resting place, the National Egyptian Museum of Civilization. They included Ramesses II, one of the country's most famous pharaohs. and
Anthony
one that
Hopkins
actually
says
put
he
who
thought
had to wear a full
torturing the
spear
Holy
as
Spirit was the
female
best
pharaohs
way
were frowned
to
upon.
win you over.
Spectacles
You know,
ultimately
as far as
designed
getting your
to attract
attention,
millions of tourists
your undivided
who visit
attention.
Egypt every year.
He may have been sniffing at your asshole and had certain desires that are unnatural. I don't know. I mean, how many times do you get to see the God of the universe's asshole? It's probably intoxicating to certain types of people. don't know what they do. I suppose I'm existing at other levels too, and helping you and guiding you. I don't think I'm your equal though. I think I'm everybody else's equal, but not yours. And I was the secretary when Jacobson told me I wasn't his equal, and I thought I was. So, but I don't think I'm your equal. I wouldn't want to be your equal. Your job is too hard.
This Wednesday on Euronews.
They say that money makes the world go round, but what happens when our world is rocked by a pandemic? How does it feel for money in your pocket, for jobs and for businesses? And who's the Join us in a new series of Real Economy where we explain the jargon, ask the big questions, and meet the real people on the ground. That's Real Economy on Euronews and Euronews.com.
Anthony Hopkins says he has convinced you you're just a lonely boy. That's all I got. The rest is unintelligible. Anthony Hopkins says he has convinced you that you are just a lonely boy. Us, then Russia, then China. Ann Lansberg Ellsworth Cran says China couldn't develop its military manufacturing well enough because they were so busy torturing infants and children in garment factories in China.
Vaccine from a total of 18 million who received the jab.
Protests continue in England and Wales against a draft law that would give police greater control over demonstrations.
A bottleneck of hundreds of ships waiting to pass through the Suez Canal has now been cleared after it was blocked for 6 days.
Ann Lansberg Ellsworth Cran says the people who grew up with me and stuff like that, who are the highest status in the world, to other Satanists too, like even to Ivanka Trump.
Italians are entering their second Easter under lockdown.
And Wendy Duda has high status for reasons I am unaware of.
Police officers will be patrolling parks, roads and beaches.
I liked her okay,
Obey the rules. All non-essential
but she was just kind of someone to hang around with.
Cafes and restaurants can only do takeaways.
And apparently she tried to cash in on a close friendship with me in the decade or more that I was out of touch with her by my choosing.
I think it's an absurd
I don't
thing
know.
that you can travel
Probably.
Europe, but not in Italy, with all the precautions we
But
took.
I was morally
Tests,
offended by
visas,
Wendy,
authorizations we
just
were
in
asked
general,
for.
and
So
dropped
eventually,
contact with her.
We're going to Fuerteventura.
Well, she admired Donna.
In Germany,
Pretty much the whole time I knew Wendy Duda, she would praise my mother, my government-assigned maternal, parental demon.
Restrictions. Trust in a democracy, it rests on a very fragile understanding between citizens and the state. You, state, do your part. I, citizen, do mine. And in France,
Satan say here he sends people.
month-long lockdown when all non-essential
Affirm,
shops
reaffirm,
and
affirm,
travel
reaffirm,
limited to a distance of
to the
10
power of an
kilometers.
infinite number of infinities.
Scores of people queue up outside Francis Group Palmer Stadium, this time not to see First Division Football Club Olympique Lyonnais play, but to get vaccinated against COVID-19. After a slow start, the French government stepped up its inoculation efforts, and over the next 2 weekends, 14,000 people are expected to get a jab, thanks to the mobilisation of 200 volunteers. This vaccination will span over 5 days here, today, tomorrow and Monday to start with. It will help us increase and accelerate vaccinations, which is essential.
I threw away the cigarette case that was so important to
We've seen that this
Satanists.
vaccination protects.
It represented you.
Being taken to hospitals
It was
less frequently because of the protection of the vaccine.
a raven
On the
or a
Italian island
crow.
of Sicily, churches are being used as COVID-19 vaccination centres.
I don't know what it
Aged
was.
between
It was a
69
black
and
bird.
79 are eligible for inoculation.
And I liked
Large
the
numbers are
picture of
expected
it.
to
So I
receive
bought
shots
it.
of the AstraZeneca vaccine, but fewer
And
than 6,000
I
people
decorated
registered
it.
on the whole island. And in the Lithuanian capital, more
Well, I
than 1,000
guess.
people were vaccinated in the first 3 hours of a dramatic
And I ended up throwing it away because
vaccination
they
campaign over the Easter
identified it with you, God.
weekend. The drive is both a
And
test
they'd get worked up
preparedness
if I
for
did take a
vaccination
cigarette out of
this
it,
spring, and as a
or
way
if
to
I didn't
utilise
take a
the
cigarette out of
accumulating
it.
AstraZeneca vaccines.
So I threw it away.
7 people have died from blood clots after being given the AstraZeneca virus in the UK, according to the
But ever
country's
since I
medicines
purchased the
regulator.
Sacred God
The agency
cigarette
said
case,
so far 30 people
that's
have developed
their
blood
version of
clots
it.
Out of a total of 18 million
It was
who received the
something
jab.
I
It
purchased.
also stressed there's no clear evidence that it's a genuine side effect.
It was after I
just
met
a
you, but maybe
coincidence,
years
and
after.
that the benefits of the
I saw it on
vaccine so
Facebook. I was
far
doing a
outweigh
search
risks.
on Amazon.
Concerns over the
I was doing a
AstraZeneca
search
shot
on
have been enough for several
cigarette
countries to
cases because I
restrict
wanted
its use to
one.
older people.
And I
Those
found it
nations
and I fell in love with
Canada,
it.
France,
And I posted
Netherlands, and Germany.
a picture of it to Facebook.
Experts are still trying to determine if
And
the rare blood clots are
Rose
caused
Stephan
by the
thought
vaccine.
I had
Earlier
painted
this
it
week,
or
the
drawn
British
it.
Medicines Agency
And I said,
said
no, I
it
wish.
hasn't been proven, but it is possible.
Excuse me.
Even if the vaccine is the cause of the clots, the numbers only indicate around 1 death in every 2.5 million people who receive the jab.
Protests against a draft law that would give police greater control over demonstrations continued
I'm not
on
gonna read it
Saturday
again.
in England
I
and
just-
Wales.
There's no point. I'll
So-called
finish.
Kill the Bill rallies took place in central London and 24 other towns and cities. Critics of the bill say it's an attack
I'm just
on
sitting
the right
through
to
Anthony
protest and a
Hopkins'
step towards
ascended
authoritarianism.
crap.
The latest demonstrations come after police were condemned for crackdowns when 3 such rallies turned violent in the city of Bristol last month. COVID regulations have since been relaxed and protests are now lawful in England and Wales, providing organisers take steps to limit the potential transmission of the coronavirus.
All the ships that were stranded when the massive container vessel Ever Given got stuck have now been able to pass through the Suez Canal.
I am whatever
including the
you
US
see me
aircraft
as.
carrier, the Dwight Eisenhower.
That's what I
The
am
Canal
to you.
Authority announced on Saturday that ships on both sides of the waterway have got through. Comparable in size to a
You
skyscraper,
kind of create
Ever
me
Given was fully
with your point of
refloated on
view.
Monday. It had crashed into a bank of a single-lane stretch of the canal about 6 kilometres from the southern entrance. And it had held up the world's 7.6 billion
Your point of
euro
view is
shipping
one
trade in 6
aspect
days.
of how my universe sees
420
me.
ships with about 26
It's
million
not an
tons
aspect
on
of
board
how I see myself,
stuck in a
and
bottleneck.
it doesn't seem to be an
That's
aspect
for some
of how
ships
God
to take
sees
a
me.
long alternate route
He
around
seems
the
to think the
Cape
grocery
and
make me
the
look,
southern
the more beautiful I am.
Another protester is frantically carried away after being shot by Myanmar's security forces. Moments earlier in the city of Moniwa, the man had been out on the streets demonstrating against the military seizure of power 2 months ago. One of his rescuers told the Associated Press news agency that 2 protesters were killed in the clashes. According to Myanmar's Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, at least 550 civilians have now been killed. In the second biggest city, Mandalay, people took to motorbikes to protest in the hope that it would make it more difficult for the security forces to apprehend them. Even people talking to journalists have been targeted. On Friday, armed plainclothes police took 5 people into custody
I
after
may
they
just
spoke with a
take it
CNN
out.
reporter in a market in the largest city, Yangon.
This is an hour and 2 minutes long, so I'll see what's going
The
on.
Brussels Palais de Justice, one of Europe's largest buildings, has been a prisoner of its scaffolding for nearly 40 years.
I'm gonna download this and then
Water leaks, its basements in a
I may
bad
just
state,
take a
and
nap,
holes
you know,
in
without the
ceiling
camera
are
on, or
commonplace.
have
The
it pointed
decrepit
at the
building is
truck.
about to be unravelled.
So it'll be there.
The
There'll be
government's
nothing on
finally
it.
committed to its